Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we explore what happens when a group travels together on a need-to-know basis. What does that mean? The element of surprise. Our guest is Craig O'Boyle, a real estate entrepreneur from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Craig works hard and plays hard. Every year, he and a group of close comrades who have dubbed themselves the Outdoorsy Guys, or OGs for short, take a guys trip together. But there's a catch. Craig, as the organizer, is the only one that knows where they're going, and the rest simply and willingly show up at the designated airport to find out what will happen next. Would you be up for that kind of a trip? This is a story about getting out of our comfort zone, trusting that all will be well, all centered around the fun and good time antics that ensue in the process. Craig, welcome to the campfire.
Scott, thanks for having me. Your intro was great. I appreciate it. I'm ready to go. I'm going to go do something after we're done now. I'm expired.
Man, I'm so giddy. I love this. Like this idea that these guys show up at the airport and have no idea where they're going. Like, I mean, that's terrifying. I want to jump right in. Like, can you tell me about these OG trips? What is an OG trip?
Well, I think now we might add in there old guys trips too. You know, we're all getting up there. We're all, I'm the only one not over 50 now, but it is basically a trip that we have done since 2015 that sort of evolved out of a group of guys who met through an organization about growing and learning about our lives and our business. And we're going every year out to this event, and we started to say, let's do something around it. And we started with a pilgrimage to California. Two of my close friends rode a train from Chicago to Grand Junction, Colorado. I had actually just finished a mountain bike race near there. I picked them up, and then it was like, okay, like 3 or 4 days later, we got to be in California. Let's just get in the truck and go. And we had no plan. I had a loose idea of the general direction I wanted to take us. Yeah, that's where it was born. I think the nature of not having a huge plan was enticing to all three of us, especially me. But I had probably the most idea of which way we would go because I was driving. I was in control. So that's how it was born. And we've now done 9 trips over the last 10 years. So.
Well, and so that's crazy too, because I mean, 2025 will be the 10-year trip. I'm excited to hear kind of what's in store there. Let's hold off on that. We'll come back to it. But who are the OGs?
The first 2 other guys on the trip, a guy named Peter Deneen and another guy named Patrick Santry, which they both live in Chicago. I call them off the boat Irishmen. They're both from Ireland. And I met them at the conference, and it was immediately a click, just hilarious human beings, and wanted to get them know them deeper. And so they were on the first trip and the second trip we did. Then the third trip, one guy, Pat, could not make. And so Pete and I said, hey, there's got to be somebody else that would fit in here. And so the fourth guy who joined us, Bob Privilege out of Boston, Massachusetts, came along, and we did our third trip with 3 of us. So the first 3 trips were just 3 guys. Yep. And then from the 4th on, it was all 4 of us together, and we all meshed just perfectly in terms of who we are, how our personalities come together and everything else.
Yeah. Okay. So the first trip was pretty much a road trip to the conference.
Correct. With some crazy adventures in the middle that really turned into just a fantastic story to tell people. Like we went through Moab, we did a bunch of canyoneering. We ended up kind of just taking this roundabout way and ended up in Hurricane, Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And we camped by this lake with all these sand dunes just off. Really, by the next day, we really had to be in Monterey, California. So we get up pretty early, pack up, and we're getting ready to drive out. And there was a dune buggy rental place. We just said, hey, let's do this for an hour. This sounds cool. So we went in, rent a dune buggy. The guy at 8 a.m. renting the dune buggy was completely sloshed drunk. Rents us the dune buggy and says one thing before we leave: don't go do a bunch of donuts. You'll burn up my belt. And so I drive first. We're all having a good time going out in the dunes. We let the next guy drive, which is Pat Santry, and I feel like I'm going to die. And go for a bit. And then we let the third guy drive, Peter, and then I know I'm going to die. I'm like, you know what? I get this idea. I'm like, let's get out of the dune buggy and I'll take some pictures. And what's he proceed to do is start doing a bunch of donuts. And we're like, okay, it's an hour later, we better go. So we hop in and we go down a hill and he hits the gas and it's, but no momentum. And he burned the belt out. And it's a long story that I can't tell here, but we proceed to be stranded in the desert with a half a bottle of water about 10 miles from where we started.
Yeah.
And 1 bar of cell coverage. And it took us 7 hours to get out of the desert. And we ended up having to drive all night. And we showed up to conference, I think, like 6:30 in California, or that started at 9 a.m. But we had a hell of a time just telling the story about how we got stranded and the rescue and everything else. I might write it down someday. It might be in one of my things. I can't remember. But yeah, that was the start of it. It was just it turned into this just huge adventure that was unplanned, and craziness happened. And we're like, okay, let's keep going. So.
Yeah, and a lot of those details are documented on your website, which we'll share in a little bit. You know, you guys, exactly the thing that the drunk guy that rented you the dune buggy said, don't do, you did. How did that go over?
I mean, that's sort of par for the course with this group, truthfully. Like, we are not conventional rule followers, I guess.
Clearly.
Yeah. And then obviously I just started digging in. I have a habit of just really digging in on Google Maps, Google Earth, all of those things. I love it as a hobby. And I just would start finding random stuff. Our second trip, I always look for a hook. On our second trip, I found this thing outside of Joshua Tree, California. I think it's called Hollywood Town. And it was an old movie set where they made Westerns, kind of went defunct. And then somebody plunked in this bar/concert venue, which is just a few hours from LA. And they might, you never know, like you too might show up at this place from the reviews I was reading online. And then all around the Yucca Valley area are these just super unique Airbnb places to stay. And so I was like, okay, we actually did this post-conference. And then we road tripped out there and we stayed. We went to the concert venue. We had a great time. The person, when we checked into the Airbnb, it was in the evening. We drove from the conference the last day. And we had these people rolling that they were absolutely convinced the three of us were like Hollywood comedy writers or something. We just had them rolling just with jokes and going on and on. And then I road tripped back all the way to Colorado after dropping them off in, I think, Reno to fly back to Chicago.
Yeah, I want to ask you because like you've been doing this for 9 years, coming up on 10 next year, but there's definitely been, at least in the early days, a bit of an evolution on these trips, right? I mean, at first it was just a road trip, but now there's like this intentionality where like, did the other guys know, was the need to know basis thing like right from the start?
I think it really came about probably with that second trip. You know, when I found this thing in the desert, this place, I wanted that to be a surprise. Right. So the plan was a road trip again, like, hey, we'll road trip back. We'll get you to Reno and you can fly home there. We'll find some fun things to do. But when I found that unique concert venue that made no sense, I mean, it's like a literal Wild West town. And then there's this concert venue. And I thought, this is going to be wild. They're not going to, it's going to blow their minds. And so that's what I kind of continued forward with after the second year. The third year, I discovered Havasupai Falls, which is in Arizona. It's like a 10-mile hike in. You can only do it with a permit and a guide. I mean, it's basically the waterfalls calcify anything that gets in them, and it becomes these stone waterfalls and this clear blue water. If you see photos online, it kind of looks like you might be almost in a tropical jungle and the desert at the same time. So it just came about me sort of blowing their minds and having a good time. And I get a kick out of it, and they don't complain too much.
Where was the turning point to where okay, this year you're just going to show up in an airport?
Well, Havasupai Falls, the third year, we were still coupled to the trip. Like, we were going to make a stop and then go to the conference.
Yep.
After that year, I decoupled it from the conference, which was in May of every year, because it gave me greater variety in terms of the locations I could go if I didn't have to worry about weather or things like that. Like Colorado in May in the mountains, you got a lot of snow still.
Yeah.
But that third year, it was kind of like, okay, show up at the airport. I flew him to Phoenix, and unbeknownst to me, it was Cinco de Mayo. I didn't plan it that way. And let's just say we had a few beers before we moved on to the Havasupai Falls. And we all like beer and stuff like that. So that kind of became an element as well. And by the fourth year, when we went to kind of an eastern direction, we went to Brevard, Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah, it's my backyard.
Yeah. That was the first year that was really like, okay, guys, we're going these dates. I always check with them on dates. That's about the only thing they know, because we all have lives and families and everything else. So I check with them on dates, and I was like, okay, guys, I'm going to send you your flight 24 hours in advance. They have a packing list, and we'll go from there. And that was a mountain bike focused trip a little bit. Two of us are pretty experienced mountain bikers. Myself, I've got a bike back there.
Yeah.
And Bob Privilege is a big mountain biker as well. And Bob and I both shipped our bikes out there. So he didn't know anything. I gave all of the shipping information to one of his coworkers who handled the whole thing for him. Yeah. So he wouldn't know where he was going.
Hey everyone, it's Scott here. This podcast is a passion project for me because I absolutely love adventure. And it's thanks to the effort of my residential real estate team here in Charlotte, North Carolina, that many of you know as the W Realty Group, that this podcast gets funded. This awesome group of people have unmatched levels of competence and caring for our clients. If you know of anyone looking to buy or sell a home, our team serves the Charlotte, North Carolina market, but we can also help you find an agent anywhere throughout the US or Canada through our highly connected network. When you support our real estate business, you are also supporting this podcast. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your referrals. Yeah, so shout out to Bob. I sat next to Bob at dinner one night at the same conference that you're talking about. And he was telling me about these trips. And I was like, oh, man, I've got to talk to you guys about it. It just sounds like so much fun. So was there any pushback at all when you suggested hey, next year, let's do that? I'm just going to plan it and I'll just, I'll tell you what to pack, but I'm not going to tell you where we're going.
No, these are my spoiled children who it's like, they're like, oh, I get to have a great time and I don't have to do any work, I don't see it as work though, honestly. I mean, I actually spent a few hours in the middle of my workday yesterday working on next year's trip, which I'm really excited about. I'm not going to say anything about it.
Yeah, I guess you can't tell us, right?
No. The word, I can't let the word get back to the guys. That's the thing. So oftentimes, I have to enlist even the people that are helping us with stuff on the days of the trip to not talk about what's going on as well. Because not only do they not know where they're going, every day they have no idea what they're doing. And this is the ultra planner in me. I mean, sometimes I have these trips down to the hour and the minute. Like, okay, I'll know if we're doing something in the morning, how many minutes does it take us to drive to the next thing? I'll map that out in advance, and I have a whole itinerary written down that I take.
So what is it like for them? Like, what do they do to prepare, or what information do they, you said they have a packing list?
Well, every year I tell them a few things to kind of keep them motivated on the fitness level.
Okay.
I won't name any names, Pete, who kind of ignores my advice every year and just wings it. Yeah, they're all game. They know that there's certain elements now that are going to be consistent.
Yeah.
I managed to get in a few surprises now and then. I got a big one in this year.
Yeah. You guys are all very, you're all work hard, play hard types. So I guess I'm curious, like from from a personal growth standpoint, like, are there sort of guiding principles for this trip, or is this purely just unadulterated fun?
No. So when the first trip, we spent so much time driving in the car, right? Conversation is a big piece, right? Like we're talking about deep things in our lives, in our business. I mean, because this was born out of a conference that was really all about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a lot of growth, I think, that we all get just from being around each other with how we're doing. Now, I sort of took it to another level this year. Before the trip, I went and bought 4 notebooks, and I actually created a discussion list of what we were going to try and cover and accomplish over the next year, individually and possibly as a group, and those kinds of things. So like we're always bringing deep topics. I mean, we'll talk about everything from, the religion to the politics to the personal growth to the family stuff. And I think we all get a ton out of it.
Yeah. And I love that, because I think part of this whole thing is like, it's just a reminder that like adventure experiences are bonding experiences, and like adventure experiences sort of create an environment that makes it easy to connect with people and have those deeper conversations.
It helps you not be one dimensional.
Yeah. So can you share like some of the trips that you kind of told us the first couple, like what are some of kind of the elements of surprise that have come in over the years that people might be interested to hear about?
Right. So naturally, myself, I'm a kind of an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah.
You're familiar with our heritage profile stuff.
Yep.
My number one attribute is adventurer, and so I've always been the guy that's like skiing off cliffs, riding mountain bikes, diving, you name it. So when we first started kind of entering sort of fitness level of things, I would say it was really first trip 3 where we had to do that hike down into Havasupai Falls.
Yep.
A little side note on the funniest thing we did on that. One of the guys went to the bathroom, Bob, and Pete and I managed to put in a bunch of rocks in his pack, because you have to pack in all your gear.
Yeah.
He didn't figure it out until about 5 miles in, and we were dying laughing. But it was a fitness thing, right? Like there was a fitness piece to it. It was much more fitness coming out than in, but still you need it.
Yeah.
So then from there, when we went to Brevard on trip 4, I hired a guide service that did guided mountain biking, climbing and rappelling, rafting, and stuff like that. Now, the other big draw to the area is Asheville is like huge for beer.
Yeah, it is.
And the biggest connoisseur of beer I know is Bob Privilege. I mean, he is a connoisseur. I like beer.
Yeah.
I'm not that picky about it, but this guy knows his beer. So that was a big element. And then trip number 5, I brought the guys out to my home state of Colorado in the San Juan Mountains, kind of the southwest corner of Colorado, which really is almost like the Alps of America.
Mm-hmm.
And we looped around some of my favorite places. I have a favorite campsite in the state, right? The guys got off the plane. I took them to this magic place. And then, first morning we're hiking, and they're all from basically sea level. So I'm kind of kicking their butt on what I'm putting them through. And then we went to Ouray, Colorado, where we, hot springs and beer and Bridalveil Falls hike, to Silverton next day, Silverton, Colorado, where we rented ATVs. Got a huge, hilarious story around that. then we went to Durango, Colorado, and I think we did some mountain biking in Durango, Colorado. The big surprise of the trip after that was we were driving. I should say the hook of the trip was the Blues and Brews Festival in Telluride, Colorado.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So they didn't know that, of course, but we're driving towards Telluride, and there's this little place called Ophir, Colorado, high up in the mountains of San Juan Mountains. Get off, and there's like, I don't know, maybe 50 people live in it at most. And we drive in, and at the time I had a pretty new giant adventure van that I had built. We converted it to 4-wheel drive, lifted,
Nice.
super nice.
Yeah.
But we're driving in, and then the road goes from a highway to a dirt road and then down to a 2-track road. And these guys are looking around and they're like, where are we going? And I'm like, we're going this way. And we just keep going, and we keep going. The road's starting to go up and up and up and up, and then turns. And it basically is a road that is like a cliff, right? Like you're going up a cliff. It's a sheer cliff on one side. It's all rocks. You absolutely need 4-wheel drive. And they're freaking out. Like, where's this guy taking us? I don't really have a big fear of heights, but it's you're on the edge. And we get up, and there's kind of a place to park. And I park, and I'm like, okay, guys, hop out and grab your sleeping bag and, some clothes and follow me. And we start hiking up this trail. And they're like, what? And we get to this thing called Ophir Hut, which was built by a guy by hand because there's no road. And it's a staffed hut with kitchen and like bunk bedrooms and compost toilet and everything. And they staff it and they cook you food and everything. And it was just an amazing place. I mean, you're at probably 12,000 feet.
Yeah.
It's actually the reason he built it. It's like an extreme ski thing in the winter, which I have to find out a way to get down there. I haven't done it yet, but it was just an amazing time. And then we went to the Blues and Brews Festival and drank and listened to great music and had a good time.
And amidst all of this, like, it's always in the back of my mind, like, you're the only one that knows what's going on. Like the whole time, these guys are like, where are we going? Where are we going?
Yeah. Every day, then next we go to the festival. They didn't know it was coming, After that, we went to Bend, Oregon, which is another great outdoorsy mecca, from mountain biking to rafting to hiking to you name it out there. Just great food, a great lazy river to kind of float through and stuff like that. 2021, we went to Bellingham, Washington. And Bellingham's another huge mountain. I mean, mountain biking is my passion more than anything else. So there's always big hooks there. But the hook for Bellingham was I found a early 1900 ship. It was I think they call it a schooner. And they were doing a 3-day trip where you crew it.
Nice.
So like raising the sails, swabbing the deck, whatever. And I love, as a Colorado kid, I'm fascinated by like ancient sailing ships. You can't find the old, many of the old 3-deck British warships, but I don't know, maybe I died as a sailor back in the 1700s or something, because they just fascinate me. I don't know. And so that was the hook. We did that. Let's see, 2022 was a year off. One of our compatriots had some family health issues going on, and we weren't going to leave anybody behind. So we passed on 2022. 2023, we did a trip where the hook of the trip for me was around a guy I met in a restaurant who was delivering salsa that he makes. And he sat down for lunch next to me, and I just got to chatting with him. He's like, yeah, I've got this ranch in New Mexico, totally off grid, out in the middle of nowhere, outside of Taos. And we were talking, and he's a biker. And I'm like, I started telling him about the trip that we do. And I'm like, do you think I could bring the guys down someday? And like, you could give them the experience of, if you live in the Southwest, like salsa and chilies are a big deal. It's a big part of like what we are out here. And so I
Chili
was like,
peppers, maybe.
yeah. And so this guy grows everything, like the hot ghost peppers, all the stuff, you name it. And so that was the hook. We went down, picked him up in Albuquerque, went to Santa Fe. They have this thing in Santa Fe that's like a mini Burning Man. It's called the Burn Zozobra. Right. And they build this giant effigy thing, and they just do a festival around it. They burn it. It's kind of a cool thing. Great mountain biking around Santa Fe in the most odd place ever. This place called Glorieta, New Mexico, which is a Christian camp. They built some of the most extreme trails I have ever seen. They do enduro racing there. So we went there, and then we're driving through the desert towards Taos. I pull over at a gas station. They think maybe to go to the restroom. And I'm like, oh, let's just hang out for a minute, guys. Let's see what happens. And this gal shows up, and she's like, hey, guys, hop in the car and follow me. And they're like, what? Where are we going? What's going on? And we follow her. We turn off the highway, and we're just driving into the desert. And they're looking at each other, looking at us. They're like, where are we? And all of a sudden, we come up to this house in this big shop that these guys built. And we get out, and I'm like, okay. We tell him this guy has his own chili farm. Gives us a tour of the chili farm, and he's like, okay, we're gonna slaughter a lamb, and we're gonna cook it over this giant fire pit. And I've got a bunch of sleeping bags. You guys are just gonna sleep out wherever you can throw them in the desert. And then he sets up this whole like tasting line of his whole sauces. I will give him a shout out. It's called Taos Hum. And it's not on our website yet because I'm behind on writing a few things up, but it is amazing stuff. But it becomes this competition of like who can survive.
Yeah, that's real survival. Taos Hum. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, amazing stuff. And we just have a blast. And then from there we went up to I have a cabin. Well, I should say my family. My wife's family has a cabin, and we took them there. And then I flew them out of my hometown of Colorado Springs. And then last year, I guess the 24th of this year, we went to Vermont. This year, Bob knew a little bit. I had to enlist Bob because he has a couple of houses outside of Vermont.
Okay.
One in Killington and one, actually, I don't know what the town is, but in the middle of Vermont. I didn't realize Vermont's pretty rural.
Yes, it is.
And just out in the middle of nowhere on a lake. And we did tons of great mountain biking up in that area. We had one accident this year. Pete managed to break his ankle, and we just proceeded to take him to the hospital and get the hospital rolling and laughing and having a good time. We just made it part of the adventure. He's recovering now, it's okay. Broken ankle. Those things are going to happen if you're going to do adventures, right?
Yeah. So you guys had an experience on this last trip that kind of blows my mind for showing up, not knowing what you're doing.
Yeah. You probably saw the video of some of that I had put online. But yeah, Pete unfortunately didn't get to join us for this, but we hopped in the car one day and we had to drive about an hour and a half, right, out into the middle of nowhere. And I've got the GPS coordinates, and Bob's driving, and I'm like, okay, we're almost there. And they're looking around. They're like, where the heck are we? What's going on? And all of a sudden we turn off the road, and there's a sign that says Vermont skydiving next to a completely derelict plane.
Wow.
And they got really, really quiet.
I guess so.
Yeah. For guys that are talkers, it got really, really quiet. Right. And they're like, okay.
Had any of you guys jumped out of a plane before?
I have, yeah, I've done it. That was probably my fourth jump, I think, that we did. But I didn't realize. I think Pat had done it, and I didn't know this. Is Bob had kind of made a family commitment that he'd never do it. I think maybe he told me that, and I just didn't remember at one point. But he did it. We all, the funniest thing about it, we sign up, the gear up, the guys are there, and you get in the tiny, tiny little plane. And the whole inside of the plane is basically like duct taped together. So the most dangerous part is probably the plane, truthfully. So we had a great time and made the most of the trip, and now I'm planning 2025. So
These guys are serious troopers. I mean, I think about the roles that each of you guys plays in this whole experience. Like you as the creator, like everything. Like you're not part of the surprise because you're the one that creates all this. And then for them, like showing up not knowing anything. I guess I'm just kind of curious how like everybody's personality sort of fits into this like creator versus like willing participant not knowing anything.
yeah, I mean, I think the role I am, it's very much who I am, right? Outside of the adventurer, my next most intense piece of me is kind of this thing called a commander, which is, they'll say it's about efficiency. I think it's just kind of about being in charge.
Yeah.
To kind of like control where you're going. I'm maybe a little bit of a control freak even. The guys, who they are and who their personalities are, I kind of made some notes on this, like the way I would describe them each, right? Like Pete, for the way I would describe him, he's kind of like the happy-go-lucky guy who's cool no matter what happens, right? Like he broke his leg. He's like, whatever, he goes along with whatever. He has a good time, whether it goes right or goes wrong. Pat, I would say he's kind of this super deadpan humor guy, right? Like you might be somewhere in a serious moment, truthfully, and all of a sudden he'll whip out a joke out of nowhere about the situation that's you'll just drop it like a dead bomb.
Yeah.
And it'll crack you up, right? And he's kind of this guy who he's also like very much devil's advocate when we're having conversations, right? Like he really looks at things from both sides of the coin. One thing I did forget to mention about Pete, because I know the guys that listen to this, is he has terrible jokes. They're funny. They're so bad they're funny, but that's who he is. Bob, he's kind of the guy that will be brutally honest about himself and about any topic you're talking under the sun. I mean, he is just going to. It's almost like what you expect from somebody from Boston, right? Like he is going to drop the hammer,
very direct,
and tell it like it is. But he's also the best one-line joke teller you'll ever meet. I don't know how he remembers them all. The first trip, he had me and Pete absolutely dying for like 2 hours just telling these one-line jokes. I don't even, I can remember maybe one or two, but yeah, he's got that. And so, I mean, this mesh together is also, I would say, the one thing where we're all very similar guys is we are hyper pragmatic people, and that's a nice fit in terms of just how we approach everything we're going into, right? Like, okay, Pete has a saying, he's like, sometimes I'll be like, do you guys want to, we've gone this far, what do we want to do? Do you really want to do X? I give him a little bit of choice, and he's like, we'll never be here again, man. We'll never be here again. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, you talked about like yourself being like commander, a little bit of a control freak. Like, I'm curious, like if the trip would work if the tables were turned.
Sure. I just don't think they enjoy the piece that I do, right? Like I guess the question is, would I be as trusting? I don't know. Right. Like none of them are commanders, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'll be like, oh, I mean, I think I'd go along with it. I do think I would, but none of us feel like the need to switch it up.
Yeah. No, totally. It's just kind of a thought provoking thing for me. I share commander with you. I have that same trait. And, I just think about like pulling up and, I don't know. I don't like, I seek adventure as well, but like jumping out of an airplane is not on my bucket list. And I just like, I don't know what I would do if you pulled me up to a derelict plane and said, this is what we're doing. I'd be like, oh boy.
Well, here's an honest part of it. If somebody said no, the amount of shit that they're going to get, I don't know if I can say that on your podcast here, but we're going to bust them up pretty hard, right?
I get it. I get it. So I want to talk a little bit about like trust and getting out of your comfort zone. Cause I mean, these guys like being willing to show up and just do whatever. Obviously they're just like putting their whole selves into this. They totally understand that they're going to be they're going to be stepping outside of their comfort zone, not just like jumping out of an airplane, but you guys like it's known there's going to be pranks, there's going to be jokes, there's going to be all kinds of antics that are going to ensue. How has that trust developed? Can you just speak to that trust that they have?
The fact that we all know each other at a core level, right? Like what makes us tick.
Yeah.
Right. Like what are our hopes and our dreams for our family and our life and stuff like that. Like when you're open with somebody at the deepest levels, right? They're not going to put you in a situation where you're intentionally going to be harmed. But I mean, accidental harm is just part of living life.
Part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, at the same time, maybe I try to abuse the trust a little bit. I haven't really touched on it yet, but beginning in our 6th trip, which was to Bend, Oregon, I decided to kind of find a gag to play on them. And I found this ranch that was doing horseback riding, which that doesn't really do it for me in terms of adrenaline. So I called up the guy and I was telling him about the trip and what we do. And I said, look, I know you got cattle. I don't want to ride around on your trails on a horse tailing my buddies. But man, I've never been on a cattle drive. I'd like to just, he's like, yeah, we could do something like that. Nice. And then I said, but here's the other thing I want to do, right? The guys don't know what they're going to do. They have nothing about the trip. I would like if you would help me mess with them a little bit. Like make them do something that is not something you would normally do on vacation. I don't care what it is. I was like, I have no idea. I have no plan. I mean, I don't care if you're like, hey boys, by the way, part of working a ranch is you got to muck out stalls, right? And do something like that and whatever. And the guy's like, okay, well, let me think about it, right? And about a month later, he had called me up and he goes, I got it. Okay, let's do this. Let's book it. And we got it. And so we did the trip and we drove the cattle. We went back and his wife had just basically cooked this like ranch style lunch that was literally as if you went to eat your last meal. I mean, it was this perfect lunch. Like we were all like, oh my God, that was so much food. And then we go out and we go to the barn and he's like, okay, boys, stand here for a sec. I'll be right back. And the guys are looking at me and they look at the table we're standing around. There's 4 pairs of work gloves. And they're kind of looking at the gloves and they're looking at me and they're looking at each other. And the guy comes back and he's like, grab those gloves and hop in the truck. And I go, okay. So we hop in the truck. Guy drives us out into this field and he's like, all right, boys, hop out of the truck and put those, take the tags off, put the gloves on. And then he's like, grab the tools out of the back of the truck. And they're like, what's going on? And then we proceeded while I'm videoing them, and I did help, but to basically spend 2 hours of removing old barbed wire fence from the ranch. I mean, the guy was giving him the full ranch experience, right? And I'm taking videos. And I'm like, how's your vacation, boys? The best thing for the rancher, I love it. It's a great story. He basically got paid to have somebody do a job that would have taken him probably a week to do. And we did it in 2 hours.
Yeah. Hard work, but also, I'm sure, a new experience for everybody. And obviously, we're talking about it right now. It's a great memory.
Yeah, great story. So, but part of it's a prank. It's me taking their trust and going, you're kind of a fool. But at the same time, having a good time around it. So,
but they do it willfully and they enjoy it. I mean, I just imagine like the laughter and the fun that you guys are having on this trip.
Yeah. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And we've got a lot of things that have developed out of laughter and fun. We're a very lively bunch. And so when we get into a brewery and we're having a good time, it's not uncommon for somebody to go, what's your story? And what do you guys do? And so we sort of started this running gag where when that happens, we have a competition as to who can mess this up first. And we'll tell people, well, we all met at a conference and like, oh, or we're out here for conference. What's the conference? And we're like, well, we're all morticians. We're at a morticians conference. Right. And then it becomes like, who can make the story the most audacious and ridiculous. And so like, I mean, at one point we got to the thing where like Pat, apparently he holds the national record for the fastest embalming in the United States. He can get an embalming done in like 2.5 minutes.
Love it.
You know, and like first people are kind of skeptical, and then we work it so good, like they're like, really? Oh my God, I've never heard of this, you know, until somebody breaks, until somebody loses it.
It sounds like just such an amazing group of just close friends. I'm curious, like for you personally, what's it like to know that you have that deep level of trust with these three guys?
You know, it's something I think I always wanted in my life. You know, I'm an outgoing guy. I can be friendly with anybody and have good acquaintances. But, you know, what I came to realize was through going through that program, which you are in for
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
was how much I think I wanted to have the level of closeness with guys specifically,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think it's important for women to women and guys to guys, truthfully.
Yep.
And guys, I think it's less common, right? We're
Agreed.
carry your own water, take care of your own stuff and stuff like that. And so it started with Pete. Like the instantly I heard Pete speak and tell jokes and stuff like that, it was like, oh, wow, I like this guy, right? And so a couple of conferences ensued where it was just like, okay, we would take some time, we would just do our own thing, get together. And finally, one day I said, you know what, let's create an accountability thing. And we started a phone call every Friday where we would have a phone call with kind of a purpose behind it. And then from there, it started to expand with the rest of the guys. And like last night, truthfully, they don't know anything. I'm doing this podcast, but we do Zoom calls quarterly, maybe, where we just spent 2 hours on a Zoom call dealing with some pretty heavy stuff. And I think more men need that. And to do that, I think you just have to put yourself out there with somebody that you've built some level with and say, hey, let's go deeper and just see what happens.
Have you seen that sort of, I mean, there's obviously a deep camaraderie and like deep relationships. Have you seen like impacts of that on each other's lives? Have you seen like each other transform in certain ways because of this experience?
So I was having a conversation with Pete where he was whining about this, that, and the other in his life. And at the time, he was probably early 40s, unmarried, no kids. I've got 3 kids. At the time, I had 2. And I just looked at him. I said, dude, you need to shut up, stop whining, get married, and have kids. Because these things that you're talking about as problems aren't problems. Pete now is married. Went to his wedding in Ireland, which was an amazing experience.
Nice.
And 3 kids. You know, Pat was an unmarried guy, married with 2 kids. Definitely effects in our business in terms of like where we wanted to go, how we wanted to get things. Sometimes when we've retreated in areas of our life, you know, just some support, like, okay, well, how are you going to, what is the path out? What is the path through? Those kinds of things. I have a 3rd child that I like to say, my wife will cringe. I like to say is an American product made in Ireland because she was made at Pete's wedding.
Nice.
But I mean, the growth of that kind of stuff, I would say I was unsure about having a 3rd child and kind of like conversations and stuff like that. I was like, my wife wanted to do it. And I was like, okay, let's make it happen. Let's go for it. So.
Yeah. Craig, it's funny, like as we sit here and talk, like this is like, you know, there's adrenaline, there's like macho, there's adventure, but to something like I feel like compelled to say on this episode, on this podcast, like I feel a really strong love between dudes. And like guys don't like to talk about love. They don't like to use the word love, but like, you know, at the core of all of this, that's what I'm feeling.
We got off the call last night and it ends with, I love you guys.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I agree with you. I think everybody needs that. I think, you know, girls trip, whether it's a girls trip or a guy's trip, like just that camaraderie. And I feel like this whole episode is sort of a testimony to the why, but just to kind of dumb things down, like for listeners right now, if you could just kind of comment, like, why do you think these kinds of trips are important?
You only get one trip through this life, right? Mm-hmm. I am a nuts for photography, right? Because I have Every single computer I have cycles through my photo albums. I have photo albums in the house that are electronic that cycle through photos. I have all of this stuff. So I want to make the most of this trip through life, but I want to also reflect on the past all the time.
Yeah.
Look back, before we got on this call, I was kind of reviewing some of our stuff, and I was like, in my head, I was going like, damn, I did that. I did that. I did that. I did that. Like, just the memories. I laughed at this. I remember this. This was tough. Those kinds of things. You only get one trip through it, so you better seize it and you better make the most of it. And if you can do it with people together, all the better. And I'm also a guy who likes to do things. So tomorrow I'm going mountain biking for 3 days in Grand Junction solo, just to close out the mountain biking season. Just get out there, live your life, experience as much as you can, because when it's over, it's over.
Yeah. So Craig, I know people that know you and know that you guys do these trips ask you all the time, like, oh man, that's such a cool idea. Like, I want to do something like that. How do I do something like that? What do you say to those people?
Well, the site you mentioned at the beginning, our site, OG, Old Guys, Original Gangsters, whatever you call it, Outdoorsy Guys trips, the website I created for that. I kind of thought maybe there's a way to monetize what we do a little bit. I tried that. Nobody bought them, so they're free. Right. So I just said, all right, everybody we tell this story to is like, man, I wish I could do that. I wish I could do that. I wish I could do that. I'm like, I'll make it easy for you. You can take them, and that's step by step what we did. You could take the meat, throw away the bones, make your own trip out of what we do if you want. If what we do is not your thing, just use it as inspiration. I don't care. So the other thing that's kind of helped with from time to time is like getting to do special things with leverage. Like, hey, it's almost like, hey, we'll promote you because this is where we put this out there. But I don't know. I don't know how to monetize the world. It doesn't matter to me. I got a good business. I got a good life. Whether something grows out of it or not isn't the point anymore. So
love it. So the website is ogtrips.com.
Correct.
And on that website, you can download basically all of the itineraries that you guys have followed over the last several years, right?
Most. I think the last one is the 6th. They took a long time to make when I was really into making it.
Yeah.
I should go back and add in the 2021 through 2024, but finding the time. That's all. You can also email or call me. I'll tell you everything we did.
It's a great website. It's full of information, and it's funny. You've got all of your antics are in there as well. It almost reads like yes, the itineraries are there, but they almost read like blog posts as well. So you kind of get a little flavor for some of the stories that you shared with us today.
That was my thinking when I did it. Yeah.
Yeah. So if people want to find out more about you, find out more about these trips, or even just connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Easiest way to connect to me is my regular business stuff, I would say. I mean, I'm a realtor. I have a company called O'Boyle Real Estate Group in Colorado Springs. I also have another company called Assumption Solutions that I operate as well. Best email for me is just craig@oboylegroups.net. Okay. Or I don't even care if my cell phone's here, 719-229-2060. I'll talk to anybody at any time.
Fantastic. It's awesome. I absolutely love what you guys do. I just think it's the coolest thing. When I first heard about it from Bob, I was just so inspired. I think your role in creating this and their role in just being willing to show up and just do whatever's ahead of them that day. It's the coolest thing. And listen, I think at some point, Hollywood's going to pick up on this whole thing that you guys do. And they're going to be like, wow, this whole need to know, like, they're going to want to make a movie about you guys. And I want to know, Craig, when they make a movie about this story, who's going to be the Hollywood actor that's going to play you in this movie?
Oh, gosh. The way you phrased it is not the way I prepared for your question on this. I don't know. When I thought about it, I actually said, I'm just going to combine the people that if I see them acting like it's on TV, I'll probably stop and watch the movie. And really, I had several: Paul Newman, Lee Marvin, Clint Eastwood, Steve McQueen, or Will Ferrell.
Oh man, put them all together, baby. I mean, these guys could be the OGs.
They kind of are, I think, of Hollywood for most of them. So
I love it. What's your movie going to be called?
life's a game, play hard and laugh your ass off, and then look back and smile.
Love it, man. I love it. Words to live by. Craig, this has been so much fun. Thank you for doing this trip. I know you guys have a blast, but it's a huge inspiration to people like me to see people like you doing this. The thing is, I think, adventure is all about uncertainty. When we set out on an adventure, we don't know what's coming. And you have created this ultimate adventure where, like, by the minute, they don't know what's getting ready to happen. So it's hugely inspiring. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for spending some time with me today. And for those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. I hope Craig's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Tthanks for listening. Craig O'Boyle, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was fun.